Jennifer is a learning and development professional with extensive experience in creating effective learning strategies. She currently works as a learning consultant at Cinecraft Productions, where she focuses on developing strategies that transform behavior and improve performance. Known as the Geek Whisperer, Jennifer has a diverse background in the learning and development field. She started her career as a technical writer and has since evolved into an L&D leader. Her expertise spans various areas, including social media and marketing, creating engaging learning strategies, and transforming behavior through effective learning approaches. Jennifer is recognized for her passion for learning and her ability to create impactful strategies that drive behavioral change. She's also known for her pleasant demeanor. I can agree with that, with colleagues describing her as a lovely lady and a joy to work with. In addition to her work at Cinecraft Productions, Jennifer is active in the L&D community and contributes to organizations such as the Learning Guild and ATD, and she shares her experience and insights with other professionals in the field through these organizations. And with that, Jen, how was that bio?
That actually was really accurate.
Yeah.
Does that pull from LinkedIn?
No, well, it pulls from a variety of places. I was
Okay.
telling Jen earlier, and I think I mentioned this before in other sessions. If I need a bio, I'll go to perplexity.ai and pull up a person's information. And if that person is unique enough, like if the name is unique enough, it's usually spot on. So that's what that was.
Yeah, that's impressive. I even pulled the Geek Whisper, which I got that from a podcast interview several years ago. But
Right,
and I
right,
like
right.
that it pulled up the wow. I didn't know people thought I was a joy to work with. That's fun.
It's out there. It's out there. All right, Jen, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over, and I'll hide myself from the screen. Thanks, everybody, and I'll be in the backstage area waiting for questions and things like that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I don't really have a whole lot else to add to that. That pretty much sums everything up. But if you would like to connect with me, I have a QR code here on the screen that goes to my LinkedIn page. I'm always looking to meet new people in our industry and connect with you. So today we are going to mix a special recipe that's going to help turn your good training into unforgettable learning experiences. And there's one secret ingredient that will help you do that, and that is empathy. So I know a lot of people sometimes think, oh, empathy, it's very touchy-feely, but we're going to get into how we can actually harness empathy and add that into our training design that will help you connect with your learners more. So let's just start with the basics. What are some basic things that make training design good? If you want to throw it in the chat, let's see what all we have. All right. Clear objectives, goals, absolutely. Designing for outcomes, great. Okay, there we go. Great, we have more things coming in, clear language, clear purpose, excellent. So yeah, here's just a couple of things. And if you think of all of these pieces that make good training design as kind of like a layers of cake, they build upon each other to create your training program. Now, there's one thing that can turn any cake into an exceptional cake, and that is chocolate ganache. So think of empathy like the chocolate ganache you put on top of your cake. Okay, it's just going to help enhance those flavors. It's going to make it richer, add more depth, and it's going to, get your learners excited about it. So in empathy, it goes a little bit deeper than that also. It's not just about those feelings, it's multidimensional. So it encompasses connecting with your learners on a cognitive, emotional, and compassionate level. So this means recognizing and comprehending your learners' thoughts and their emotions, and as well as genuinely caring about their experiences and their outcomes. So empathy in learning design, it involves paying attention to your learners. I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call and I had shut everything off, I thought. There's always one thing that's going on. So some of the benefits of empathy in your learning design include engaging your learners, um, having increased engagement, retention. So retaining your learners' attention longer. And it also, when they're more excited about the training, that knowledge retention also increases. And it provides meaningful learning experiences. So when you design with empathy, you are thinking about your learners on a personal level, which means including more storytelling, including examples that they can relate to. So it's creating those more meaningful learning experiences. Now, since this is an accessibility conference, I do want to point out that sometimes you will hear people use empathy and accessibility interchangeable, but they are very, very different things. Empathy in training can make a course more accessible, but just because a course checks off the accessibility boxes, it doesn't mean that it's empathetic to your learners. So empathy tends to focus on more of the emotional connection, and accessibility ensures that the training is usable by your learners. So when if you really want to have a super duper beyond great training program, you use them both together. Make sure you have those accessibility aspects to it that you've been learning about throughout the conference, and also include in your empathetic design. So we talked about the benefits, why empathy is so great, how it can help your training, but what does it mean to include it into your training design? So how do we accomplish it? There are two main things. First, you have your learner analysis, and then you have empathetic listening. So your learner analysis, it could be similar to what your needs analysis is. A lot of times you do those interviews, focus groups, send out surveys, on the job observations, what are they currently doing? How are they interacting with things? And then developing learner personas out of all of that. The empathetic, how this differs from a regular needs analysis is using the empathetic listening. So it's these two things tied together that make it different than just a straight needs analysis. So while you are gathering this information in the learner analysis, you want to do it using empathetic listening. So this means using active listening skills, nonverbal communication, looking to see if your learners are slunched over and bored, or if they are engaged. And I'm going to actually delve into these a little bit more, so I'm jumping ahead of myself. Asking open-ended questions, and then doing empathy mapping. So let's take this deeper look at it. Okay, the learner analysis, these can be one-on-one interviews. So you can, in the one-on-one interviews, you conduct in-depth interviews with your learners to gather the qualitative insights about their experiences and their motivations. You'll also touch on what challenges are they having, what are their learning preferences, that type of thing. You can also have focus groups. These tend to be small groups of people, and usually you have this structured questions around it. So it'll discuss specific topics, gather diverse perspectives. So you really want to make sure that you have a diverse group of people in there. Next, you have surveys, and there's two main types of surveys. You have the pre-training surveys and the post-training surveys. Now, pre-training surveys, these can be things that you send out to the learners to gauge how much information they already know about the topic. Um, and you might do this before you even develop the training to help you identify where there might be gaps. Or it could be surveys that you send out for training that's already done. So you want to get that baseline knowledge, they take the training, and then you can send the questions again to see if that training did help bridge that gap. So the pre-training surveys can be whether training is already developed or not. And then the post-training surveys, those are typically, I like to call those smiley sheets. You know, what did you think about the training? Was it effective use of your time? Any aspects that you found difficult? What would you improve? That kind of thing. So getting their overall satisfaction on the training. And number 3, observation. So as I started explaining before, this could be looking at if you have a classroom training, it's great to observe your learners in the seats. Are they engaged? Are they making eye contact? Are they falling asleep? Are they doodling? But it could also be workplace observations. So if you, let's say safety training, you may go on a plant floor and see how people are moving around the equipment. Are they doing lockout tagout properly? Are there things on the floor that should be picked up? Are the walkways cleared? So observing how people interact in their workspace and the things that are around them. And then from this information, you can then develop your learner personas. One thing that I always like to point out to people, you don't have to have just one learner persona for your training. It depends on what the training is for and who your audience is, but you could have several learner personas if you have several different roles taking the training, because people will have different background knowledge or different experiences. So you want to capture that in your learner persona. Now, you don't want to have a million learner personas. That would kind of defeat the point of developing one. But you often you will find that you'll have like a good 2 or 3 learner personas for your training based off of your analysis. So the next, using the empathetic listening. So this is how you really take that analysis part and you make it more of a learner analysis instead of a needs analysis. So I use those as different terms because needs analysis has always felt very technical oriented to me, where a learner analysis seems more personable and you're really analyzing the people and not just the need. So how we do that, how we incorporate the empathetic listening, first is active listening. You want to show genuine interest in what the people are saying. Anytime you can have a face-to-face interaction with your learners is great. We have all, since the pandemic, become much more comfortable getting on camera on our computers. So I think that doing it virtually also works well, but I highly recommend make sure both of your cameras are on. Make that eye contact, show them that you are paying attention. Another thing that I found to help show that I'm genuinely interested in what they're saying is I will write out my questions ahead of time, just so I know the main points I want to hit. But I don't just read question number 1, then read question number 2. I ask questions based off of their comments and what they're saying, trying to have more of an organic conversation with them. So that's another way to show that you are actively listening to them. You also want to reflect and clarify. So if somebody says something, you might want to restate it to them in different words, just to make sure that you are actually understanding what they are saying. So a method that I use for that is I'll say, what I hear you saying is, or it sounds like you are feeling this way. So that kind of helps me restate and clarify those things. Um, Nonverbal communication, we already mentioned, if you're in a classroom, making sure people aren't, uh, falling asleep or anything like that. If they're fidgety, when you're doing interviews, paying attention to the body language can also help identify maybe somebody's not comfortable talking about what you're asking them. Maybe they're afraid what they say is going to get back to their boss and it'll look bad on them. So they might not come out and say that, but they might hesitate, or they stop making eye contact, or all of a sudden they're blushing. So that is a good indicator for you that, hey, there's something going on here. I might need to adjust, or I might need to make sure that they are comfortable talking. So paying attention to that body language, you can really learn a lot of different things. We already mentioned that maintaining eye contact so that you show you are interested and engaged. Next is asking open-ended questions. A lot of times I struggle in interviews to get people to elaborate on things. They want to give me just one-word answers. So you really have to work on your interview skills to draw out more detail. On the flip side of that, sometimes you have some people that like to overshare. So you also might need to rein them in a little bit and keep them on topic. But you also want to make sure that you do that in, the most empathetic way possible. You don't want to talk over them, but it is definitely a skill. And the only way to improve at it is to keep doing it. Another thing is, don't ask them yes or no questions. Making sure that they're open-ended. For example, can you tell me more about your experience with the training? Not, did you like the training? Just tell me about your experience. Or how did that training make you feel when you were done? And this kind of goes into the next question: avoid leading questions. So you don't want to say you liked that training, right? Or that training really helped you perform your job better, didn't it? You don't want to make them feel like they have to answer it in a certain way in order to please you. And then fourth is the empathy mapping. So we're going to delve deeper into exactly what empathy mapping is. But at a high level, it helps you to capture insights about your learners. It gets into you documenting what the learners say, what they think, some of their pain points, and then some of the things, what would they gain out of the training? I'm sure we all remember the back in the day, it was popular to start training with what's in it for me, kind of thing. So that was one way how to get your learners to want to take the training, is to let them know what's in it for you. What are you going to get out of this training? We don't necessarily want to just state that to learners anymore, but it is something that's good to know, especially if you know what the learners are expecting to get out of the training. Are they expecting this is going to help them perform better in their job? Is this something that is going to keep them safe? So you want to know what their expectations are from the training. Okay, so cooking with care. That's similar to what using empathy is. Think about maybe your mother or your grandmother would cook for you when you were little, and they always seem to know exactly what foods you liked best and exactly how to make them so it always tasted delicious. I remember my grandmother used to make the best lemon meringue pie, and it was just phenomenal. And it was always my favorite. So anytime that I was coming over for maybe staying a whole weekend, or something like that, she would always make sure that she had a lemon meringue pie. And that just made me feel extra special. So when you design with empathy, it is very similar to that. It's making your learners feel extra special. It's delivering that lemon meringue pie for them when they come to take your training. So empathy, it's about creating learner-centric content that speaks directly to your learners, and it it speaks directly to like their background, what their needs are, and their existing learning environment. We also want to make sure that our design, how we design the content, is inclusive and accessible. And what I mean by that is it should be relevant to a diverse audience. You don't want to use scenarios that is only going to resonate with, let's say, a desk worker when you are also going to have plant workers taking taking the training. So it can be diversity in roles. It can be diversity in regions. Um, sometimes talking about how cold it is or snow isn't going to resonate with a learner that lives in Texas. So you want to make sure that you are making things relevant to a diverse audience, and accessible. So looking at if you're using sound, you want to make sure that you learners can use sound on their computer. Or if they have hearing impairments also, you want to make sure that it will resonate with them. Let's see. So designing with empathy can include emotional design. And how we do that is by using stories and scenarios. You could also use multimedia elements that help evoke positive emotions. So all of that also encompasses designing with empathy. Okay. All right. So just like chefs, they have their little taste testing spoons. As designers, we need to make sure we need to taste test our training to make sure that it is going to resonate with our learners. So how we do that is by getting feedback. You can pilot things, make sure that it's going to function how you think. If you're going to pilot something, you want to make sure that you do hit that diverse group of people. Don't just test one group of people and get their feedback. You want to spread it out. Another way that you can do your taste testing is to have feedback mechanisms. So is there a way for your learners to reach out to you to let you know what they felt about the training course, or to let you know that maybe something isn't functioning how it's supposed to be or how it would be expected to be? Now, one thing I want to point out with these feedback mechanisms, has anybody heard of the feedback fatigue? Learners were always asking for feedback about our courses, right? Well, the smiley sheets, like I said, what did you like the training? Did it meet your needs? Do you feel like you can do your job based off the training? We're always collecting that information, but how often do we actually do something with that information? So if you are asking your learners for feedback, do something with that feedback, or let them know that they were heard, their feedback is being considered. So this includes, and we'll get into it a little bit more. I think I'm jumping ahead of myself too. This includes making sure that you can iterate your courses to include that feedback and address those different needs that they provide to you. Yep, there it is. I was getting ahead of myself. Iterative design. So thinking about, you're going to be collecting feedback from your learners to make sure it's meeting their needs. To be empathetic, you want to address that feedback So keep in mind in the designing phase that you are going to be making iterations. Make it easier on yourself. You don't want to create something that if you have to change it, it's going to take a long time or it's going to be very convoluted. So keep in mind that you are going to have iterations with this. Now, that being said, I work for Cinecraft Productions. We do a lot of video. Video isn't always the easiest thing to update, nor the cheapest thing to update. So if we are looking at using video in a course, we absolutely want to take into consideration how likely is this going to stand the test of time? Is it likely going to need to change in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? What is the shelf life of this? So that's definitely something you want to keep in the back of your mind when you're designing your training. And also, all these things that I'm mentioning for incorporating empathy, it would be great if we could all incorporate every single aspect of this. I mean, we would have the best training out there. However, the reality is we can't always use every single aspect. Just like if you're going through, the accessibility checklist, it isn't always possible to check every single one of those boxes. So you just want to make sure that you can do the best you can and accomplish as much as possible while sticking within some of your constraints. So know what your constraints are, keep those in mind in the design phase. If you can, make an iterative design. Okay, I will get off my soapbox. Okay, now here's really the meat of this presentation here. Empathy map. So has anybody heard of empathy map or done empathy mapping before? See a thumbs up, couple thumbs up. Okay, great. So I'm glad we have some people that are at least familiar with it. So empathy map is a collaborative tool that teams will use to gain a deeper insight into their customers or users. And I'm saying customers because empathy mapping became really popular and is used a lot in marketing. That's how these marketing companies know how to make these, commercials that really hook you in or, get you to come into their store and buy their products. So it's because they've really tapped in to the empathy map, really gained those deep insights on the people. So another thing that the empathy maps help with, it'll help you visualize the attitudes and behaviors of your target learners. So that's like really crucial for developing the solutions that's going to resonate with them. Just like needs analysis, empathy maps are typically done during the design phase, very early on, but they can be done after the fact also. If I recently did an empathy map with a long-term client, we've been developing training with them forever. However, once you do training forever and ever and ever, you kind of get into a little bit of, I like to call it, there's a commercial. I thought I was in a groove, but here I was in a rut. It becomes too templatized and you stop really connecting with your learners. So an empathy map is a great way to get you out of that rut and to take a fresh look at your training and find out exactly, are your learners still getting what they need out of the training? What are things that you can do to reach them and engage them more? So you can really do an empathy map at any time. All right, let's get into how we can use this tool. So an empathy map, typically, and Luis did put a link up there for handouts this session. I do have templates for an empathy map, and I have a blueprint for integrating empathy into your training. So you can find that link in the chat there. It's on the website and you can download those resources, or you feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to email them to you. So typically an empathy map is divided into quadrants. That doesn't quite look as nice on screen, so I have bubbles. So you have in there think and feel, hear, see, say and do. Then there's also pain points and gains. So let's look at each one of these individually. So the think and feel, this section is where you are going to capture what the learner is thinking and feeling while they're experiencing a situation or taking training. And I'll go through, I have an example one that will spell these out a little bit better for you. But high level, it's just while they're taking the training, what are they thinking? Are they thinking about their dinner? Or are they thinking about this is a waste of my time? Or are they thinking, wow, that scenario was great. You know, never thought about interacting with a customer in that way. So capturing some of those thoughts and feelings while they take the training. Next is what do they hear? And this can take a couple of different forms. And I also want to point out that because I'm saying this is what this section means, doesn't mean that's the only way to interpret it. I interpret some things very differently than other people might be interpreting them. So the hearing, I think about what is the people's environment like around them while they're taking the training? Is it very noisy and they're not going to be able to concentrate or hear the audio? Or is my audio too loud? Or is the background music too loud and you can't hear the voiceover narration? So those types of hearing, it's kind of all encompassing. It could also be what are things that the learners are hearing that could influence how they feel about the training. So maybe one of their coworkers said, oh, wow, that training was really great. So the learner is already going in thinking, great things about the training. So they're a little bit more positive about the training, as opposed to they heard, oh, wow, that training was so boring. It was just a waste of my time. Be prepared to fall asleep, have your coffee ready. Well, you're going to go into that training with a very different attitude if that's something you're hearing. So those are a couple of ways that you can interpret the hear bubble. Next, we have see. Again, this could be a couple of different things. It could be what are they seeing on the screen? Are the colors have enough contrast? Is the font large enough? Or it could be their environment. Are they seeing motivational posters up on the wall that are putting them in a positive mindset? Are they, seeing, brown shag carpet and, wood paneling that is going to just make it, a dreary workplace? So what are the types of things that are going to influence their perceptions and their behaviors? Next, we have say and do. So this quadrant, it might be a little bit trickier to get learners to say what they're truly thinking in the interviews. So sometimes you have to go back then to the observation. And so if they're saying this training is really great, but on the side, they're telling their coworkers that it was a snooze fest. Or if they said, yes, this training is going to help me do my job and I understand it, but they then are not following the proper procedures. So are they saying and doing the same thing? And then pay points. So what are some things that are challenges for your learners? What are some obstacles or problems they might encounter? Do they have any fears or frustrations that could influence how they feel about a certain training topic or how a training is delivered? I know one of my big things, I hate role playing. I don't like it. It makes me nervous. I feel uncomfortable. I get those nervous giggles. So knowing how your learners will react to different types of training is very helpful. And then your gains. So contrasting with your pain points, you have your gains. What do they expect to get out of this? How do they measure success based off of what the training is going to be? All right, so we talked about the benefits of empathy in your design. So this is a little bit specific to your empathy maps. So very similar empathy mapping. It's user-centric, so it helps make sure that we're addressing our learners' needs. With it, you get a deeper understanding about who your learners are instead of just that surface level feedback. And it can also help you uncover any, hidden motivations or desires or pain points that you didn't realize that your learners had. Empathy maps can also enhance communication. So you can do this. It's not just enhanced communication with your learners, but also with your design team. You can use the empathy map as a collaborative tool. So everybody is on the same page of who your learners are and how you're trying to reach them. And it also, another benefit is it helps you identify opportunities. So this is great for identifying areas that you might need to improve in existing training, or maybe training that is missing and that is needed. It also helps you refine your existing training to make sure that it's more learner focused. Now, nothing is perfect. So with empathy maps, there are some limitations or pitfalls. Occasionally, they can have a limited perspective. Depending on how you go about collecting your data, if you strictly go by surveys that you sent out, it could limit what kind of information you have, and then it's just up to interpretation. If you are interviewing them, you're still interpreting what the people are saying, and you may interpret something that's said one way and somebody else on your team interprets it a different way. So that could be a pitfall of an empathy map. Sometimes you might have a lack of context. So if a learner is suddenly their face starts blushing when you ask them one question, you might think, oh, they're uncomfortable talking about this topic, when maybe it's more of they just had a hot flash or something. So you want to make sure that you aren't just recording like your observations of what's going on. You have to try to put some kind of context in it. So what was their body language around what they're saying? And that's one reason that we also say, you want to clarify your questions, restate it back to them what you're hearing, or, I get the feeling that you think this way or you feel this way. Is that correct? To help add some context into the information you're gathering. And that also falls into the incomplete information. So if we're strictly going off of information we gathered from, let's say, a gap analysis, we might be missing some other pieces. To really fill in an empathy map, you want to try to hit as many pieces of analysis as you can. Like I said before, it's not always possible or reasonable to do every single method, but the more you have, the more well-rounded, the more complete your information is going to be. The other pitfall is static in nature. People tend to use documents for empathy maps. I mean, this one's an easy one to alleviate. Make sure it's a living document. It's something that can be easily updated and shared with a team. So as long as you look at it as a living, breathing document and not a one and done, I think that really will help alleviate that. some tips for making sure that you succeed with your empathy maps. Include diverse stakeholders. You want to make sure that you are getting as many perspectives from as many team members as possible. The HR director might have a very different viewpoint of what training is needed than the plant manager does. So you want to make sure that you're talking to as many stakeholders as possible to really get into what is that objective that we're trying to delve into. Iterate and refine. Like I mentioned before, don't treat your empathy map as if they are static. Keep them up to date. As new information comes in, as you get new feedback, update your empathy map. And it might also require you to update your learner persona. I already mentioned using the digital templates. That's a great way to make sure that it doesn't stay static, but it also helps with the collaboration if you can have it in a centralized location. And if at all possible, link to your learner personas. You want to make sure that the persona you develop based off of the information from the empathy map is in line with that information. And as you know, you're updating the information in your empathy map, like I mentioned, look at your learner persona. You might have to update that learner persona. Okay, so I mentioned that I would show you a couple examples of what an empathy map looks like completed. So this is kind of what you could expect to see for, this example is for safety training in a manufacturing plant. So this is something that you might fill in here. I'm concerned about the safety of my work environment. I don't want to get injured. So those are some of their worries and concerns that they're thinking and feeling. Some of their aspirations and motivations. I want to feel confident, know what to do in case of an emergency. Some of the things that they might hear. And you can see on here, we divided it out from what they hear from their colleagues, what they hear from the management, and what they hear from other sources. So you want to take in consideration your learners. Where might they be getting information? Where might they be hearing things? What do they see in their environment and in training materials? So in the environment, they have safety signs, they see the emergency exits. This can be something that you could physically see. You don't have to just ask your learners what you see. If you have an opportunity, go to their learning environment. An example of this, one of our clients, they did new hire training, and the learners, their employees would come in first day and they would, get a couple of minutes of online training. They would have to go into the manager's office, which was kind of a small, cramped place, use the manager's computer as long as he wasn't using it. So problem right there. Well, if he is using it, what are they supposed to do? They're new hire. They don't know what to do. And it was also disruptive because you would have people coming in and out of the office, and it was a little bit noisy. So that was an observation we had just by going to the learning environment and seeing what it was. And right off of that, we're like, okay, we need to get this training off of the manager's computer and make it mobile. And it would be really helpful if they could take the training before they walk in the door that first day. So they're not sitting there like, what do I do? So that's just a kind of a scenario on how we have used this before. And that was just from the seeing what we knew right off the bat we needed to do with the training. Say and do. Publicly, the learner might say, sometimes it's hard to remember all the procedures, or I always double check the equipment before use. And then their actions and behaviors, they attend training sessions, they participate in drills, they wear proper safety equipment. So that could kind of give you some insight on how committed are they really, if they're saying they, are following all the procedures, are they really, are they wearing the gear? Are they taking the training? Some of their pain points, the training sessions are too long. It's hard to apply what we learn in training directly to the fast-paced work environment and their gains. Clear, concise, and job-specific safety instructions, quick reference materials that can be easily accessed in case of an emergency. So all of that being said, we have our empathy map. Now what do we do? Okay, it doesn't, just because you do an empathy map doesn't mean that magically you have an empathetic course. So first, after you understand your learners and you've created that learner persona, and like I mentioned, there may be one, you move on then to designing with emotional engagement. So this means incorporating some storytelling that connects the learners with real life applications of the training, using multimedia elements that will evoke a desired emotional response. For example, if active shooter training, often you want to show people that how serious it is. So you will show video of what it would look like employees hiding under their desks or locking themselves in a room during an active shooter event. Or if you want to evoke a positive response, you can always show a kitty video because everybody loves cute kitties. So those are just some ways that you can then try to connect with your learners, show them how the training really affects their real life. Next, you want to ensure inclusivity. So you want to design the content that is accessible and easy to understand to all your learners. Like I mentioned before, you want to consider your learners with different learning abilities, different capabilities, different learning preferences, understanding what stories will resonate with your learners. You also want to consider as many of the roles as possible, especially if your training is a broad subject that's going to be delivered to everybody in a company. You want to make sure that you have something in there for everyone that will resonate with them. You want to make sure that when they're taking the training, it is going to be accessible to them. If it's somebody on the plant floor and they only have one shared computer that they can take the training on, you want to make sure that it can be done at different times. You probably need to keep it a little bit shorter. Probably need to have something that either has minimal voiceover narration or text on screen because plants can be loud. But you also want to have something that is a little bit engaging. So you might need, some activities in it. So consider not just the people sitting at their, that have the desk jobs that are on the computer all day. You have to consider other people if they are going to be your learners too. How are they interacting with the training and design for them? Fourth, you want to facilitate meaningful interactions. So create opportunities for your learners to reflect on and discuss their feelings and thoughts throughout the training. So that can be those scenarios and those simulations that allows them to experience the content in different ways. I have seen some training that will be, now reflect on this question, which is great. I always like to have the learners do something with that reflection, instead of, just tell them to think about it. Cause if that was me, I would just click on through it. So having them reflect on it and then do something with that reflection. Lastly, we've touched on this many times, iterate based on feedback. Don't ask for the learner's feedback unless you plan on doing something with it. So you can avoid that feedback fatigue. Okay. Oh, and then the design for the iterations. So as I had mentioned before, keeping that in mind if you are going to be iterating. All right. So just real quick, this is one of the handouts that I have available to you is this checklist for making sure that your training is incorporating as empathy as much as possible. Like I mentioned, you can't always check every single box, but the more you can check, the better. So it delves a little bit more into understanding the learners, the emotional experience, inclusivity, and that type of thing. So by infusing your empathy into your training, you can take it from good training to great training. It's just like your cake with all of the fancy decorations and that chocolate ganache. So I don't know. I wasn't able to keep up with the chat. I apologize. I'm not very good at reading and talking at the same time. Did we have any questions in here that people were asking?
Let's see. There was, let me take a look at, okay. So here's one in the QA area from, here, let me show it here. This one was from Arpita. Could you elaborate a little about eye contact? Neurodivergent learners and learners with trauma might not be comfortable with eye contact, and some might not be comfortable with facing the camera.
Yeah, that is a good point. So like I mentioned before, it's not always reasonable to do all of those things, but you try to do as much as possible. By looking at their body language, you might notice them feeling uncomfortable and, ask them, would you rather turn off the cameras, or are you uncomfortable with eye contact? And then, of course, stand by that. You don't want to make your learner uncomfortable. And that's actually something I'm planning on working on another presentation about. How do you make your interviewees, the people that you're interviewing, comfortable to get the information you need? Because that's a whole art in itself, is learning how to read the room and then adjust and adapt to that. So that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind. And that's part of empathy, right? If you're truly being empathetic, you recognize when somebody's uncomfortable and you respect that. So good question.
Nice. There was also some conversation in chat about user experience design and learning experience design, and sort of similarities and differences.
Yeah, so there are a lot of, and you will find that with a lot of these things. When we're talking about learning experience design, user experience design, we're talking about empathy map, journey mapping, needs analysis, learner analysis. There's a lot of overlap in all of these things, right? We find that all over in our industry. So user experience, I tend to think of that as more of the technical side of it. I know that that's not always, and it's a very broad general, but it really gets into how learners are clicking. Are they using their mouse? Are they scrolling their finger? What colors are you using? That type of thing. The empathy design, it does take that into consideration, because you want to design your things for how learners are going to use it. I guess it's just, kind of two sides of the same coin.
I love it. Yeah. No, I agree. Very nice. All right. And yeah, I think that is it.
Okay.
As far
Yeah,
as
and if you're already doing the user design, if you're already using one of those checklists, it's really easy to add in a couple more boxes to make it to include empathy in it too. So it's not difficult to add to
nice.
existing ones.
Excellent. All right. Well, Jen, I think that's it. I appreciate you joining in with us for this one. Jennifer has done other sessions, quite a few actually, with TLDC. So if you go to thetldc.com and do a search there, you'll probably find links to some of her other sessions. And again, Jen, thanks for doing this one. Really appreciate you being part of the event. And
Absolutely. I always enjoy working with you.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I think this community is just great. It's very I don't know. The one thing is the chat is always just rich with all the experienced people that tend to join up, and it's really just sort of informal and everybody really working together to try to find solutions and help lift each other up. So yeah, pretty lucky that we get to do this. Let's see. And tomorrow we start the day out with our friend Alan Natachu talking about the importance of allyship, and he is absolutely fantastic. So please make sure that you all log in tomorrow to chat with him. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this one out, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again, Jen.
Thank you.
All right, bye everybody.